Hi, welcome to this second part of our conversation around co-located or hybrid workshops, specifically talking about the Zoom platform and the tools found within. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see some of the stuff that I'm referring to kind of as we go. But I do want to suggest to you that the other video that we talked about, where we just talked about Zoom in general, please do take a look at that. It really will showcase some of the important things that we have to remember when it comes to being intentional about how we use these products, how we can keep calm so that our students or participants also keep calm, and then to really be intentional with our facilitation to make sure that we're being specific and explicit in how we do that. In this video, we want to talk about some of the tools beyond simply the video sharing, the video concepts. We want to talk about screen sharing, we want to talk about whiteboarding, and we want to talk about breakout rooms. So when it comes to these concepts, do know that as you start to think about going into one of those areas, you're going to need to know the Zoom environment a little bit better. Now, some of you may know it very well, but one example is that you might want to think about not just sharing the screen in terms of PowerPoint and documents. You might want to think about sharing your screen. Because remember, you're going to have people sitting in the classroom or the hotel room or conference room where you are, and you're going to have some sort of screen or monitor behind you with the participants. Well, that may be helpful then to say, I want to share with the people that are live what's happening remotely so that any chats that come up or any nonverbals that are being used can be seen. So you want to become very adept at opening up the chat, or as we suggested in the last video, perhaps showing the participant list, things like that. But once it comes time for you to share some sort of communication from you, the facilitator, to all of the participants, those that are in person and those that are co-located in a different location, now we talk about what people traditionally think of when they think of screen sharing. When you get ready to share your screen, you want to become very adept and familiar with the share screen button. Now you probably see a chat button, a share screen button, some record buttons, things like that. It's the share screen that you want to pay close attention to. And you also then have to know what it is you want to share. Do you want to share the entire screen? Do you want to share a specific concept, a specific software tool that you're sharing, a specific PowerPoint, a specific document, something like that? If you choose to share your entire screen, keep in mind that anytime that you do anything, people will see whatever's on that screen. So if you have your email up in the background and then you say, I want to show a PowerPoint, if you escape out of that PowerPoint, it is possible that the email will become the top layer and people will be able to see that. So there are reasons to choose showing the entire screen and reasons to choose not showing the entire screen. Going back to our earlier conversation, we want to be intentional. We want to make sure that we're doing this for a specific reason. Now, at the same time, as you think about this, you want to become very good at what I'm going to call toggle learning. You want to be able to toggle quickly to and fro, back and forth, in between and out of certain things. So in other words, if we think about being intentional, we think about being explicit, there are times that you may want the screen behind you showing the thumbnails of any people who are involved. And again, maybe that also includes the participant list, maybe that also includes chat. There will be other times when you may want to bring in a different view, a gallery view, or a speaker view, so that the people who are talking are in the biggest portion of the screen, while those that are simply following along or listening are at the top or along the side. That's another important thing to take a look at before the class starts. Where do those thumbnails show up? Sometimes they show up at the top, sometimes they show up on the side, depending on the screen size. You can move them, but just know where they are so that you have the ability to intentionally communicate with and talk with some of those people. But again, it may not be about just showing the people who are in person all of those who are remote. It may be about communicating with them, chatting with them, having conversations with them. That can certainly be done over the conferencing system that's set up with the audio, but it can also be done through chat. Now, if you're going to have chat, you might want to have someone in the audience responsible to say, excuse me, I think something just came in on chat. and then have them read it out loud, or have the person then come off mute and expound upon what they're talking about. But again, you may want to share information, documentation, PowerPoint slides. You're probably going to have some sort of slide at some point that you want to show people. Now you can bring those things up through the screen sharing capability so that everyone in the room can still see it up on that monitor or the projector slideshow behind you, or the people remotely can see it just as easily using the digital means. Now, after you've decided that you want to be done screen sharing, and this is part of that toggle learning that we have to really embrace, then you also need to know how to stop sharing. So you want to make sure that you know where that stop sharing button is. Now, in some cases, it's going to be up at the top of screens. It depends on your computer. It depends, again, on the projector and the setup. So you may have to look for it up there. Sometimes all that you will see is this tiny little, the stop share and the ID number for the meeting, the green and red, for those of you that can see color. You would see that probably at the bottom of your screen. And it's not until you actually put your mouse over it that the rest of it pops up and allows you to do some other things. But here is where you stop sharing. So you simply click stop sharing and it comes back to that view of, again, the thumbnails or the gallery or the speaker view or whatever you have. So you really want to find those moments to be intentional about saying, we all need to look at this document, this artifact, this picture, this asset, this video, whatever it is. And then there's times that you want to stop sharing so that everybody can see each other in the environment, those that are live and in person, and those that are live and co-located. The next thing that we might want to share is a whiteboard. So when you go in and say, share my screen, or perform that same step we just did a moment ago with screen sharing, one of the options in this list of opportunities here is a whiteboard. You can choose to share a whiteboard. Now, when you share a whiteboard, what you're sharing is a place where you, the facilitator of the conversation, and your co-facilitator, the other person who is a facilitator with NeighborWorks, the both of you can do some writing or drawing. You could use a pen or use some inking. If you don't have that capability, or if you're not comfortable with that capability, then you can also bring up, as you see on this example, a little Post-it note. And you can type on there or write on there if you would like to. But very importantly, your remote participants could also potentially participate here if you want them to. You could ask them to do the same thing by choosing to annotate. That's the menu choice they have to make to annotate if they don't automatically see the little bar that's in the whiteboard space. And then they can draw, they can text, they can write, they can do those sorts of things. But again, that's something that you might want to be intentional about, because your face-to-face participants won't have that capability. They won't be in the Zoom like you will. So that's something to keep in mind. Similarly, there may be times when you have people broken into groups, and maybe you've got one table over here working together and one table over here working together, and maybe they're drawing on a poster board, or they're writing and putting stickies on a Post-it board. Now you could replicate that same thing for your remote audience. They could do that too. Or you could break them into breakout rooms, which we'll see in just a second. So the idea here is very simple. When it's time, you want to come off of whatever it is that you're doing and really try to showcase to your audience the things that you would normally probably write on a whiteboard or a chalkboard that was sitting behind you. Let me see if I can show you an example of this just for a moment, just so you can see what I'm referring to. I'm going to go in and share my screen, but this time I'm going to choose to share a whiteboard. Now, just like it will be with you, it will, there's a camera somewhere else. It's not necessarily the camera that's on the computer, probably not the camera that's on the computer, but now I've got a whiteboard on my computer, even though I'm looking at the camera over here. So now I can come up and, just like I would do, I can come in and say, point number one that we're going to talk about today is housing. So just again, like you would do on a chalkboard or on a whiteboard, you can do the same thing here. Then you can say number two, we're going to talk about loans. And then number three, number four, number five, and so on. Now notice that I can write in just as messy a fashion on here as I could on a whiteboard or a chalkboard behind me. You obviously want to make sure that your stuff is viewable and usable. If it's not, you actually can very easily erase some things. Say, sorry about that, gang. I did not have a good, I did not say housing very well. Let me write that a little bit nicer. But again, you also can begin to draw. You can draw that house. You can draw that, that example or illustration if you want to. Now, if you want to see and hear more about that, I'll give you an asset you can use for that. But the idea here is pretty simple. This is the place where you will put for everyone to see, because remember, your in-person audience will still see this on the monitor. They will see this whiteboard. Now, what's also nice about this is if I stop sharing and I come back to talk just like I would be in a conversation, and then I want to go back to sharing that whiteboard yet again. I hit my share screen, I hit the whiteboard, I hit share. It's still in place. It's still there. Now I can erase it, or I can clear and save it if I want to. I can hit the little save button up here or the clear button if I'd like to. But you can also just keep it in place throughout the entirety of your experience. And then you'll have it all there so that you can go back to it time and time again. Do note that the whiteboard does go away if it's a multi-day training. It will not be there on day 2. So you will want to take a download of that by clicking on the save option. And when you click on save, it allows you to save in multiple formats. You can save it as a PDF file, or you can save it as a PNG image. All right. Now, again, when I say to use some drawing techniques, you may be thinking, why would I do that? I don't want to use any drawing techniques. Well, let me see if I can help you understand why you might want to do that. There's a video that I created called The Power of the Pen. I'm going to link it at the end of this video, and you can click right to it if you want to. It talks about how powerful drawing is for learning and for memory and for contextualization. It also talks about how some of the best artists in the classroom don't know how to draw, because it's actually better for the brain, it's better for the mind. So if you want to take a look at that, I highly encourage you to just spend a few more minutes looking at The Power of the Pen if you want to start looking at ways that you can draw in real time, rather than going out and grabbing PowerPoints with lots of good, rich, high fidelity pictures, which actually don't lead to learning nearly as well. But with that said, let's go to the third thing that we said we would talk about in this video, which is breakout rooms. Now, there are all kinds of reasons that you may choose to use breakout rooms. I gave you one example before where maybe you've got people in your face-to-face experience that are actually have been broken into groups, and maybe you need to take your group online because there's 15 or 20 of them, break them into groups of 2 or 3. Not a problem. Just like with everything that we have shown you and everything that we will show you, just like the conversation we had in some of the other courses that we've taught with you guys, please don't ever hesitate to go to Google and just look up how to do something. There are videos and reviews and information out there, both by the companies that make these products, as well as by practitioners, saying, here's an easy way to do something. Here's a clever way to do something. Here's a good way to do something. When I simply went into Google and I typed Zoom breakout rooms, the very first thing that came up was the support section of Zoom, talking about how to manage breakout rooms, how to pre-assign participants, or how to randomly assign participants, and then how to actually participate yourself in the breakout rooms. So with that said, just like you do with screen sharing, just like you do with whiteboarding, you start in that lower menu bar and you click on breakout rooms. When you do that, if you're doing this in real time, it will then ask you, how many do you want to create? And do you want us to assign people individually to that breakout room, or do you want to assign them yourself manually? Or do you want to let the participants choose? Say you put up 3 breakout rooms that have to do with 3 different topics and let people choose the topic they want. All 3 of those things are options. After that choice is made, then you can click on create. And at that time, the breakout rooms now exist. Those participants online have been moved into those breakout rooms. What's pretty nice as a facilitator, I can now go and visit those breakout rooms. Since there will be 2 NeighborWorks facilitators with these trainings, then perhaps that's the moment to say, in-person facilitator 1, will walk around and work with the groups that are live and local. And facilitator number 2 will go from breakout room to breakout room, having conversations, seeing if there are questions, seeing if there are problems or issues. At the same time, note that they can broadcast a message to all the breakout rooms. You can say something like, please consider this question now, or 60 seconds and we're all coming back. And then you can stop that breakout room by hitting close all rooms, and then everyone comes back to one place. The idea is very simple. We're still trying to be intentional. We're still trying to be explicit in how we train. So we've talked through the entire Zoom suite at this point. We've talked about being intentional and facilitating explicitly, but then we also just got done talking about how to share your screen, both for sharing of the screen with the live audience, as well as sharing the information with the entire audience. And then we talked about whiteboarding, why you would do that, how you might do that. We talked about breakout rooms and how and why you might start to use those. Obviously, there are other reasons that you might choose to do any one of these things. There's a lot of creativity that you might have at your disposal, and you can certainly take a look and see if this is something that you want to use. My encouragement to you, just like in the first video, go in and try it ahead of time. Get into that Zoom environment and give whatever you're trying a chance. In fact, maybe practice it with your co-facilitator once, just to make sure that you feel comfortable with it. The more you do this, the better you will feel with all of it. I really, really encourage you to make sure that you're staying intentional and staying explicit. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll talk at the next one. Good luck and good learning.